Hey, it's not Happy Friday, it's Happy Wednesday where I am in the world right now. And excuse my summer swim hair, the summer has finally hit the UK, hurrah. So we've been having some long days with some beautiful weather and enjoying the sea. It's been fabulous. How are you riding? How are the energies? I'd love to hear how you're getting on, where you are in the world. There's quite a global network here, which is awesome. And we're in it together, aren't we? It's absolutely part of my work and absolutely one of the things I'm really passionate about in all of this that I do, in all the content I do, in all of my work, in the book that I'm writing, in the oracle deck that I'm creating, in everything I do. I'm really passionate about the underlying message that we are in it together, we are evolving together, and hopefully evolving with as much grace and flow and ease as possible. So welcome to my YouTube channel, Evolve with Grace, with me, Stella Grace. And this video that I'm going to talk about tonight has been trying to be birthed through me into the world for weeks. And I keep getting the nudge, and the nudges are getting louder and louder. So here I am today talking about patriarchal imbalance. And I've been getting the nudge that I must do this with more clarity and more definitive delivery than I have done in the past. And I'm going to explain a bit about why in a moment. So a couple of things we're going to be talking about in this video. We're going to be talking about the patriarchal imbalance that is still at play. We're also going to be talking about how that is shifting. We're going to touch on some astrology with that and where we're moving. But I've been very clearly nudged that I have to talk about the imbalance as it stands and as it is at play at the moment with much more clarity to begin with. What we can do about that, how we're in it together, how we are part of the change and how the change is already underway. We're also going to touch on some of the astrology. Leo season is well underway. We're going to touch on that, and with particular emphasis on the infinite potential, and the infinite being the absolutely apt word of the infinite potential of the Lionsgate 8-8 portal next week, which is really, really exciting for not only manifesting our infinite potential, but also I'm going to talk about the reality of grounded, practical action steps so that it doesn't just feel fluffy or pie in the sky. We're actually going to talk about some practical, grounded stuff and some strategies which I love to bring in, because otherwise it might just sound a bit too woo for some of us, and I get that. I want to bring it into the tangible, make it action-based and tangible, and feel really achievable for us. So it's another one of the things that I'm really passionate about, is lots of tools. So we're going to cover those kind of three areas, but without further ado, I'm going to get super clear on the patriarchal imbalance that's still at play. Now, I have been talking about this in all of my content for months and months, maybe years, in different ways, in different guises and in different posts, and touching on it in some of the radio that I've done, and blogs and astrology blogs as well. So I have been talking about this stuff for some time, but I've been getting the nudge that this is getting louder, and I understand that to be because it is going to be changing. It is already underway and changing, but what I've been really clearly nudged to be much more definitive about is about the imbalance that's still at play. And I think I have been nudged to do so because to be more clear about it is to how we can access being part of more change about it. So patriarchal imbalance still at play. This may not sound revolutionary or very this might sound really obvious, but if you're not with me yet, or if you want some examples, I will explain how patriarchal imbalance is still very much at play. This is not just feminism. I'm going to start to touch on some points that maybe sound a bit like feminism, and they are perhaps within that, but this is much more than that. This is much deeper than that. It's much, it includes some of that and those absolutely powerful and empowering facets, but this is about men and women. This isn't about, this video is not about women now taking the lead, and now fighting back, and now you know, being against men. This is absolutely not that, because it's not conflict energy. But what we are being really, really clear about is about how there is still huge patriarchal imbalance, and actually within that there is actually quite a lot of violence energetically. Now I know that might sound really strange, but this is what I've been told really clearly to share, is, and through my spiritual guidance, is that the imbalance that is at play through energetic terms is violent in its nature. So not physically violent necessarily, that of course does go on. There are still people in lesser positions of power, women, children, but also sometimes men, that are being abused, that power is being misused. And there is those facets, very sadly, still violently at play. But this is also about the violence of the energy. Now, if that still sounds strange, what I mean by that is that because it's a force, because the patriarchal imbalance as an energy has a force behind it, so it is energetically violent, and this comes up at play by the nature of the system of dominance that is still at force as one large kind of facet of this. In terms of the framework that we're still currently on. Now, really interestingly, just to take a step back, so a good couple of weeks ago, maybe 3 or so weeks ago, a lovely follower of mine who always inputs with such fascinating insights and really valuable questions and comments, posted a comment on a video back along. I actually can't remember off the top of my head the title of that video now, but we were talking in the thread about the shift between the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius. Now, this is what we're in the throes of at the moment, and part of this huge shift, which happens over 2,000 years, is a huge part of this, the imbalance of power. And so we were discussing in the thread how because it's such a huge period of time, like well over 2,000 years, it's kind of hard to see where one of the ages, the age of Pisces, where that residue ends and where the next age of Aquarius starts. And actually that's because of the huge expanse of time. So if we liken it for a moment if you think about a moon phase, it's very quick. The full moon phase, for example, is over 2.5 days, and we feel that it's exact at one point. It's exact in our linear definition of seconds and minutes. It's exact at a minute point of that day. But the residue is actually felt for 2 days either side. So if we think in relative terms to a huge age of the shift of a whole age from one zodiac sign to the other over 2,000 years, we're of course going to feel that residue around the kind of 2,000 year point and either side for a number of years. So we have been into the residue of the age of Aquarius for some time. That's why we have seen some really positive changes that are more empowering, more equality. We have seen a lot of those things, but we are still very much in the throes of an imbalanced system. And within that, some still forceful, dominating, imbalanced energy. And that's what I mean by the violence of the energetics, because it's force over another, or force over someone with lesser power. And force because it's a dominant energy for misusing, for selfish gain, for profit, for power, for greed. So all of these factors are still at play, and I think perhaps I haven't been as definitive about that as I am now, because I've been very much about with the view of wanting to focus on the change, to bring in the change. Now that is still true. I am absolutely still someone who will wholeheartedly believe in what we focus on, we give momentum to. And I love that, and that's rang true with me for many, many years, and I've seen that in action, and I still believe that wholeheartedly to be true, and I will still work in that way. I will still focus on the outcomes that I wish to bring into my life, both in a kind of short-term personal way and also in terms of creating a new system, which we are all part of doing. and we are all doing that already. We hear about the new earth, we hear about, you know, the new system, and I've again been talking about this stuff for some time. You can go back and check out previous videos on this topic. But I'm more definitively talking today about not just how we are inspiring and creating that change, but actually what's going on in the world at the moment that is so incredibly imbalanced. Now we know, and we can hypothesize, and we can talk about what's going on in the world, and that general sense of imbalance, and this isn't a moan fest, this isn't what this is about, but I have been really aware that these factors are still at play, and that actually by looking at them, seeing them and talking about them very clearly, we are highlighting the reality of what's kind of currently still at play, with then the focus of being able to be part of the change, which is really exciting. So I think this was on a film advert or something the other day. I think it was like a trailer for a film, but this really stood out to me, and it was, the pattern can break you, or you can break the pattern. Now this can come across in many guises. I personally have experienced this as there was previous alcohol addiction in my family. My life has been touched by addiction, and I've been someone in my family line who has broken a pattern. It's not just with alcohol. Alcohol is one factor, but toxicity, imbalance, all those kind of features of really difficult family dynamics. I'm not saying that my life hasn't been touched by that, and I haven't been unfortunately privy to some of that, because I have, and that's been about me seeing that, raising awareness, and then breaking the pattern. And this is what came in really clearly the other day, and it's also very relevant to any of those kind of issues, any toxicity, any addiction, any domestic violence, any difficult generational patterns. And I'm not pigeonholing anyone here, I'm just giving you some examples. There will be many other things, and there will be many other personal factors that you could relate to of your own circumstances. So I'm not putting, labels in a certain type of box here. You will, think of your own and have your own examples that I haven't listed, I'm sure, and there will be countless. I'm just sharing some of the ones that I can empathize and connect with from a personal experience. But in terms of patriarchal dominance and the imbalance of that, the pattern can break you, or you can break the pattern. That is really, really powerful, and it's feeling like it's giving us a big heads up right now on what's going on and how we can start to shift it. Now this has been showing up not just, of course, we can all talk about the inequality in the world, the imbalances. Yes, women are much more empowered. Yes, women can now open a bank account since 1975, not very long ago really. So let's just look at that in terms of the relativity of time here, of our linear time system. This is very new stuff where women are start to have been given a voice, and I'm aware this is now the kind of feminist level that we're talking about, the kind of structural changes to our legal system, that kind of thing, women's rights. That is a part of this, but not only what I'm discussing. And actually, patriarchal dominance and imbalance is absolutely massively impactful for the negative on men and women. This is why, again, we are in this together. And I'll come on to some of the kind of action within that in terms of compassionate boundaries that I'm gonna come on to in terms of what we can do about this, because there's absolutely no point discussing all of this stuff. As much as it is helpful to be definitive and clear on what's happening, there's no point doing that if we're not also feeding into the change. So we're going to come on to that with some compassionate boundaries discussion and action. So we've got the day-to-day life kind of examples of the patriarchal imbalance still at play, that affect all of us, men and women. So this is not a video just for women to feel more empowered. Yes, absolutely, that is part of my work and part of what I'm passionate about doing. But this is also for how men are impacted by the patriarchal dominance and the imbalance of that as well. Think about the working week, and again, this is something I've been talking about for some time. We are all conditioned to work 40, 50 plus hours a week, with, you know, productivity, striving for money, striving to be out at work all day, every day, most days, to pay for a house and bills and a family that you then don't see all of that often, to put in one kind of simple example. Now, that may not be your experience, but I'm giving an example of how the kind of system at play is currently still imbalanced and still driven by patriarchal imbalance. So that's some of the examples that we're talking about here that can impact us and can impact men and women negatively. We are in this together because we all have feminine and masculine energy within all of us, whether we're men or women. Now, our masculine side is rightly so the dominant side. It is the leader, it is the protector, it is the provider. It does impose boundaries. And in a healthy sense, all of those things in the right quantities within men and women are a beautiful expression of the masculine, of the divine masculine, of the sacred masculine. It's I've got you. What do you need? How can I assist you? How can I pick you up? How can I hold you? How can I get behind whatever it is that you're needing? How can I really, you know, support you? That's beautiful, divine, sacred masculine energy within all of us. Unfortunately, the toxic masculine energy present within all of us has been what we've been conditioned to lead with often. That is the striving, the productivity that is for financial gain, for at the sight of losing everything else at all costs. Productivity for, you know, over wellness, over family, over balance in oneself and one's life. And how this impacts on the feminine energy is then we're less receptive, we're less in our creativity, we're less in our flow state. And again, this feminine essence is present in men and women. Obviously, the feminine will be stronger in the females and the masculine will be stronger in the males, but we all have both. Men and women have both. So when our feminine essence is disempowered and suppressed and imbalanced, like it has been for many, many years and is still at play, is we are less encouraged to lead by our intuition. We are less encouraged, and this is something else I've got a lot of topic and content within my book and within other places. We are conditioned not to listen to our gut feeling. We're conditioned not to listen to our intuition. We're conditioned to turn off our psychic abilities at a young age. We're conditioned to structure everything around the system and the working week and doing for others and leaving ourselves last on the list. Not going with the flow, structuring a hugely busy schedule, you know, and we're very, very conditioned by this. This is something that we're often all doing far too much of still, and still a huge part of it. I'm still in that as well. You know, I'm not sat here saying I'm not doing any of those things, and I'm fully in my divine feminine state all day long, because I'm really not. You know, I'm in this system as much as you are, and that's what's really beautiful about us having these conversations. That's why I'm really passionate, because we are growing together, we're evolving together, and we get to talk about this stuff. And actually, just having these conversations is incredibly empowering and helpful for rebalancing some of this huge imbalance, because it wouldn't have been that long ago I would have been burnt at the stake for this. So just going to, you know, just give my thanks, give my blessings, give my gratitude to the fact that we can actually even have these conversations without being hung, drawn, quartered, slaughtered, burnt at the stakes for it, which many of our lineage ancestors, you know, brother and sisterhood would have been, for stepping out of line, for speaking out, for spiritual kind of beliefs, for using natural cycles, for using the bounty of the land, herbs, spices, plants, as medicines. That is huge background of this dominance and patriarchal imbalance, and this is why I talk about the energy of it being violent. And even though we're not being hung, drawn or quartered or burnt at the stakes anymore, this energy is still present. It's very, very present. I'll share something from my personal life where this has come in, and this was another nudge where my nudges were getting louder. So I think it was last week I had, I suppose you could, I'm just going to talk about it really freely. I suppose you could describe him as a troll post on one of my videos, and what it's actually done is thrown up not only another nudge to share this content with you and have these conversations, and to have the realization that, wow, let's get more definitive and honest about what's actually at play here, but it was also really fascinating for giving me a reminder of how there's so many of us still navigating this dominant, forceful energy that is imbalanced and patriarchal. And, you know, I consider myself self-aware. I'm doing, you know, I do a lot of reflection. I do a lot of personal development work, spiritual development work. I'm, you know, kind of on it, but still, of course, evolving on a daily basis. And I was reminded on that note by this troll's comment about, he put to me that I was spending, go back to spending my husband's money. Now, fascinating, that led to insight, because I'm apparently only going to be out in the video enjoying the summer with my children, supposedly on the assumption that I must be spending my husband's money, that there was no understanding or no assumption that I might have my own money. The assumption that I was actually married in the first place and had a husband that I must have, and that I could only be, you know, using a male counterpart's resources, because it must have been a strange idea that I would have my own. And I actually replied with some food for thought. I thought this was really interesting. You know, this really fits in with a topic I'd been discussing with a genuine follower a couple of weeks before. So it was all incredibly synchronous in terms of the timing, and it really got me thinking. It got me really considering this as food for thought and as further content. So it's actually been really, really interesting and insightful. And then a further comment that I must be gaining my own resources through doing OnlyFans, which again is not true, it's incorrect. And there's absolutely no judgment on anybody who wants to do OnlyFans for one example of you know, of however someone wants to generate their own resources. But again, the patriarchal imbalance assumption there was that it must be something exploitative to women to easily gain money. Now, this again is another example of how the imbalanced patriarchal dominance is at play. Because for women to apparently gain their own resources, there's an assumption amongst the toxic masculine or the imbalanced patriarchal masculine, just to be really clear, not amongst, I'm not generalizing men here, I'm talking about this energy specifically. There's an assumption in patriarchal dominance energy that women can only gain resources through exploiting themselves physically. That was kind of the underlying energy and assumption here. So absolutely fascinating stuff that here we are in 2024, and this is the energy still at play. Now, it might look more subtle than being burnt at the stake or not being able to open a bank account, but it's absolutely the same. It's absolutely the same energy. It's still forceful, it's still dominance, it's still exploitative of women as being seen as a lesser power, as a lesser force, as less able than men. Now, the truth of the matter is that the workplace is still not fair to women in terms of pay, in terms of hours, in terms of rights, in terms of maternity, in terms of all of that stuff, but we are still absolutely able to access and make and create our own resources. Now, that it's not always as easy, we might not always have as many opportunities, because this is still the system that we are living in, but many women are utilizing all sorts of opportunities that don't involve exploitation on how they look or anything in the realms of any exploitation. So it's food for thought. I would love to hear what you think. I would love to hear if you've had any experience of the patriarchal dominance in your life currently. I mean, we've all got it in our lives currently because we're in the system. If you're watching from somewhere in the West, then we're in the system. We've got experience of this energy every single day. But I would love to hear if you have some thoughts around a specific example of how we can highlight this to look to then change it and be part of breaking the pattern rather than the pattern breaking us. Now, I'm also going to come on now to action and compassionate boundaries. This is equally as important, because I don't feel like I now have a hate energy or a negative energy or a conflicting energy to the troll that made those comments. It kind of took me back, and I then had a process and then looked at it and then found the insight from it. But I didn't feel reactive. I didn't feel I was going to get into an argument. Definitely not. I didn't feel conflicting. I didn't feel like, kicking off, because in reality, individuals within that mindset or within that energy have been conditioned too, just as much as those who have experienced the disempowerment. So this is another point, that we are all in it together. Now that can be really hard, and that's where I am now very clearly putting it as compassionate boundaries, because there is still a boundary needed. There is still action needed to readdress the imbalance and bring in balance. We're not going to ignore that behavior. I didn't ignore it. I didn't argue, but I definitely wasn't going to ignore it. I was going to speak as I found, with insights and with my own clarity and with my own experience, my own voice, my own expression. And what a beautiful gift to be able to do that, because as I was saying, I wouldn't have been able to do that a number of years ago. So we're not ignoring it. We're not being silenced anymore. We're all speaking out on this as men and women together in it. We're speaking out, we're doing this work, we're looking at this stuff. It's a part of evolving, it's a part of developing. And whether we choose to be on a spiritual path or not, or whether we choose to kind of do some work personally or even professionally on this is going to impact on all of us. However consciously or unconsciously we want to kind of navigate it and want to work with it. It's happening, but it's a really beautiful opportunity actually to do some really conscious work and have some insight into our own lives, how it's impacting on our work pattern. So I work, but I'm not working the level of hours that would compromise my family. I don't mind sharing, I'm a single parent. I can't work a crazy amount of hours that would impact on my family, because I need to be well. So I don't do the system thing as much as I possibly can. Now, I'm still a part of the system, but I consciously, and I will sometimes forget, of course I'm human, and I will go out of sync at times, extra busy periods, preparing for certain deadlines or something like that. I can go out of whack, of course, and I'll be more in my masculine, and I'll feel like I'm striving, and I'll lose my flow, and then I bring it back and I remember again. And so one of the ways I do that is by scheduling self-care, regular self-care. This is why I'm so passionate about the holistics. And self-love, and really valuing where we're at, having a look at where we're at. If we need to rebalance again, if we forget, then we, bringing it back in, because that's the thing about being human. Like, we're gonna make mistakes. Mistakes is not even the right word, because we kind of need to make mistakes to learn and grow. So mistake sounds negative, and actually it's a completely human part of all of this and evolving. So those are some of the nuggets really as to how I address the toxic masculine energy that can come up within myself as part of the toxic masculine in our system and around us, and to bring in the divine masculine, you know, the compassionate boundaries. And this is what is part of the action we can take here. So we're not silenced, we're not putting up with it, we're not being disempowered anymore. We're having a voice, we're changing our patterns, we're doing everything we can to bring in healthy balance, but we're also not going to get into arguments. We're not fighting. This isn't conflict energy. Boundaries, loving boundaries, compassionate boundaries. This is no, I'm not going to take that shit. I'm not going to be disempowered. Like, that's not what I'm here for. That's not going to happen. And too many of us have gone before for us to now be in a position to be still taking that. We don't have to do that anymore. But we're not fighting. We're not in loggerheads. We're not in conflict. We're not in anger. We're not in wars. You know, there's too much of that already still happening. We don't have to. This is again about our choice. So I really would invite you, and again, if you're happy to share in the comments, I'd love to hear that about your action, your compassionate boundaries, how you're navigating or how you would like to navigate, bringing in the balance of the feminine and the masculine energies within your own life. I'd love to hear more about that. So that is the topic of patriarchal dominance and imbalance covered. I'm going to quickly go on to the astrology, and then I will really look forward to seeing you next week for, actually in a couple of days, for the Leo new moon content I'm going to talk about on Friday. So Leo season is well underway. I love it. This is timely as well because, I mean, we can talk about this at any day of the year, and I talk about much of that in my content. Like, please don't wait for an astrological aspect or event to mean that it's okay to do a certain thing. We can do this work or any work any day of the year, but it's a really beautiful time to be having these conversations, specifically because Leo energy, which the season is well underway now with the sun being in Leo for about the last week. Also, we've got sovereignty as one of the highest evolved aspects of Leo energy is about sovereignty. It's about knowing one's value, knowing one's worth, being confident, bold and self-assured. And that's whether we're men or women, you know, again, within all of us, that energy of complete definitive leaders, courage, just knowing who we are, knowing that we're really confident and capable in our own skin. And the beautiful thing about that, because Leo energy can sometimes get a bad rap for, or to be honest, on a more shadow aspect of Leo, or on, let's say, a less evolved energy of Leo, can lean into more arrogance or self-absorbed. And that is where Leo in its more evolved state, on the contrary, is actually so warm and so comfortable, basking in its own radiance, that it naturally warms others. So the evolved sense of Leo, the highest aspect and expression of Leo, is like the sun. It's ruled by the sun, the sign of Leo. And so it's that warmth. We've got the midsummer, we've got the summer holidays, we've got all of the vibrancy of midsummer with Leo season, which is beautiful. It's warm energy, it's romantic because it's playful, it's fun, it's adventurous in a fun sense. It's got a bold confidence to it. Like the sun, it is warming, it's energizing. And so Leo in its highest evolved aspect will naturally be so confident in basking in its own sunshine that it will naturally warm those around. So Leo energy is really beautiful when we're in that higher or more evolved aspect of Leo. And this is a great time to be looking at this. This is about knowing who we are, knowing our self-worth, knowing our own sovereignty. Like, we have the power within ourselves. We are our own authority. We are our own royalty. Leo's very, very royal, regal, proud energy. It likes to, stand up, be in the limelight, Think beautiful headdresses, or you know, beautiful hair, adornments, jewelry. It's that kind of energy on the external factors as to things that are Leo related. And if you're not a Leo, you can bring this in, or you might be aware of this kind of energy floating about if you're sensitive to energy. So it's a great time to be thinking about empowerment and rebalancing from self-power first, because it always starts with self anyway. Leo season or otherwise, it always starts with self. So even going back to the topic of patriarchal imbalance and dominance, always starts with self. Don't look to another person. Don't look to the other person that's calling the imbalance first, even though they might be coming at you with it, or they might be leading, or the system is unfair, or whatever the thing is. Come back first to how we can redress that balance within our own energy, how we can bring in more of the empowerment, how we can bring in more of the flow of the feminine in balance with the protective providing of the masculine. That is always starting with self first, no matter what's going on around us. And that actually leads me quite nicely on to the reminder to say that is how we create the new. We create the new by starting to create the new in ourselves first, creating the balance within ourselves first. It starts with us, balancing our own masculine and feminine energy, balancing it within our external world, so our workplace, our home, our families, balancing it there, and then it ripples out into the collective. And that is the path that we are on. I am always optimistic, and I always believe that we are creating a new system. It's already underway. New systems are go is one of my previous videos, if you want to catch up there. But it's already underway, it's already happening, and the astrology really supports that. As I said, going back to what we were discussing in the beginning, you know, moving into the age of Aquarius, that is about more humanitarian energy, that is about the collective, it's about redistribution of power, because Pluto is in Aquarius. So we're seeing a real death rebirth cycle of power struggles going back to the people in essence, really. And as we touched on before, this is happening over a large period of time. So Pluto for the next 20 years, that's going to be huge and game changing massively in terms of the new system. It's already underway. Pluto's already in Aquarius, and then moving into the age of Aquarius fully, which I believe, and this is like a Google thing, you can Google it as well, which I believe is around like 2080 maybe, where we're technically moving into the age of Aquarius. But there's some debate around that with astrologers, and for me, I'm less comfortable with like the definitive year and like that minute, that second, that hour, because I think energy is much more fluid than that, to be honest. So we can use that as a guideline. I mean, my personal opinion is we'd use that as a bit of a guideline, but that as I was saying before, the residue of the age of Aquarius has started, you know, long ago. Probably, yeah, well, it really ties in with the empowerment and more equality, and I think like between the last 50 and 100 years, more so 50 years. To me, that's kind of like we can see the age of Aquarius energy residue has already started, and we've got more to go, but it's happening, it's already underway. So exciting, and I think inspiring. And if you are being subjected, that's quite a strong word, isn't it? But if you're being subjected, or if you are being dominated, if there's forceful energy, if there's violent energy or violent physicality, you know, this is the time to change it. This is the time to, like, first of all, my heart goes out to you, and secondly, this is a time to know that you're not in it alone, that we are moving away from that even if things are still really hard now, we can start to make changes that will impact on a more empowered and more balanced future. So if you're having experiences of that, then I'm sending so much love to you, and trusting that all is moving in the right direction, albeit harder in the short term. So sending so much love. I'm really looking forward to talking to you about the Leo new moon in a couple of days' time. I hope you'll join me for that one, and join me over on socials. I share most of my content now. I have been a little bit quiet this week. I've been on my holidays, so I will be catching back up over the next few days, and I'm under Stella Grace Holistics on Instagram and Facebook, and I look forward to catching up there. There'll also be a blog post up. I do at least a weekly blog on stellagrace.me, my website. So sending so much love, and I look forward to speaking to you soon.